It's December 27th, and my Christmas tree has actually been up since the day before Thanksgiving, so it's about as dry as my sense of humor. It's a little more oh crispy tree and less oh Christmas tree, but that's okay because it has brought me a ton of twinkly joy this month. It has served its purpose, and I'm ready to take it down. The other thing that I'm ready to turn the page on is my December reading. It's been a great month for books, and I am excited to share 5 of my favorite reads with you in this video. My name's Nick, this is Dr. Cranky Pants Reads, and let's get into some of the chaotic energy that was my December 2024. If you saw my last video talking about the breakdown of my 2024 reading habits, you know that I included December 2023 in that. And in December 2023, I only read 3 books, and I'm happy to report that December 2024 bucked that trend. It's December 27th today, and as of this morning, I've read 11 books this month. Most of those after I finished handing in grades and got everything done that I needed to get done at work. It just created some time and space to do some things. So in this wrap up, I'm going to share 5 of my favorite books that I read this month. I've got 2 literary books, 2 middle grades novels, and then an informational text. We're also going to check in on my Tackle the TBR challenge and see how I'm doing with those 3 books. Spoiler, actually not that bad. How many times do I get to say that? Let's dive right in with the literary fiction. When I handed in grades, I was feeling a little crispy between the demands of my work and the posting schedule that I had with shorts. I just needed some reset time, and I turned to Lucy Foley for that. This is The Midnight Feast, and I've read Foley before. I've really enjoyed The Hunting Party is probably my favorite title from her. I also really liked The Paris Apartment for a variety of reasons. I needed a palate cleanser. I needed a book that made my brain feel like it was doing more than it was actually doing. I have to think, but I don't have to think too hard. In this book, we've got the Manor. It's this exclusive resort on the coast of England that has just opened. We get this cast of characters, including Francesca, the proprietor, and Addie, the aspiring bartender, and then Bella, who we can't quite figure out why she's there right away. In typical Foley fashion, she takes these characters and applies them and their storylines together in order to create the mystery. And not only do you have these characters' insights across this novel, you also have this diary from like a decade ago that helps give context to what's happening. You're constantly working your way back up to the murder that started out the book. Overall, enjoyable, formulaic a little bit, but that's exactly what I needed. It was a good afternoon that I spent with this book. No regrets. Let's shift now into some snow. I wouldn't mind some snow. I know I might be in the minority there, but I like snow. There was lots of snow in Kate Atkinson's Death at the Sign of the Rook. This is her latest Jackson Brodie novel, and it has taken me a while to get through it. But to get through it, I did and enjoy it. This book opens with Jackson Brodie investigating a suspected theft of art. There's 2 siblings whose mother has just died, and they're asking Jackson to investigate a painting that has gone missing from their mother's bedroom. They suspect the carer has taken it. And this sets Brodie off to investigate the larger web of art theft that has been happening, which brings him to Burton Makepeace, which is a big manor that has been under some financial strain. The family who owns the manor, Lady Milton and her son Cosmo, have had to try to figure out how to make that manor profitable, because you have these huge houses and they cost money. And so they've turned to some tourism. They've renovated part of it as a bed and breakfast. They've sold off some of the outbuildings, and they've also engaged in some other practices in order to keep themselves afloat that are going to come into play. The Miltons have also had a piece of art stolen. They get folded into this larger web of art theft, and everything kind of culminates the night of a murder dinner party at Burton Makepeace, and involves the art thieves, an escaped convict, a snowstorm, and lots of interesting tension. As always, Atkinson just does a delightful job of weaving these stories together. The ending felt fulfilling, and I really appreciated a lighter take on Jackson Brodie after the heavier material that was Big Sky. I am a little interested in whether there will be another Jackson Brodie novel, because what was interesting about this book is the way that Reggie kind of takes center stage, and Brodie is still a main character but kind of off to the side. It's a Jackson Brodie novel, but it felt more like an ensemble. And I'm curious about whether or not that means Atkinson's going to transition out. One of the interesting themes in this book is Jackson wrestling with the fact that he is no longer young, and what does he want that to look like, and how is that going to function? I'm curious to see how this plays out. If there's going to be another novel with Jackson Brodie, and whether or not that will shift into more Reggie. We'll see. Atkinson is always surprising, but super enjoyable. Let's talk about Alebrijes. This is Alebrijes Moving into Middle Grades by Donna Barba Higuera. And you may know her name from The Last Cuentista. It came out a couple of years ago, won lots of awards, really well-deserved, beautiful book. And this is the follow-up, and did not disappoint. It takes place in the same universe as The Last Cuentista, where the world has become this wasteland. The setting for this book is California, and it follows Leandro and his sister Gabby, who are Cascabellas, living in the city of Pocatello. And there's a definite status differentiation between the Cascabellas and the Pocatellians. The Cascabellans are descendants of field workers in that part of California. So you have that history of inequality that has manifest in that present moment. At market one day, Gabby steals a piece of fruit from a Pocatellan elite. In Katniss Everdeen fashion, Leandro offers himself up and takes the blame for that action rather than have Gabby be exiled from Pocatello, which would expose her to all kinds of threats outside of the city limits. So Leandro is then taken in and expects to be exiled in the same manner. However, the doctor who you have to go through in order to move into exile gives him another option. He can have his consciousness, his spark, as they call it in the book, implanted into an animal-like drone. If he chooses to do this, he's got a task. He has to go find the other children the doctor has given this option to who have not returned, including her own daughter. And that really begins the action of this book. If there were a critique here, it would be that exposition took an extremely long time in this novel. About halfway through, you finally get to the point where Leandro Spark is in his drone and things start happening. The last half of the book felt really packed full, and the first half of the book was a little slower moving than I would have liked it to be. But the premise of it, the explorations of themes of inequity and identity and self-worth, totally kept me pulling for this book and made it an enjoyable read. Not necessarily the same caliber as The Last Cuentista, but still very, very enjoyable. The other book that I read for middle grades, I don't have a copy of anymore because I returned it to the library yesterday. Way to manage your materials. It was Olivetti by Ali Millington. I didn't know what this book was about. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I actually did. Olivetti is a family story. Olivetti is a mystery. Olivetti is a kind of sci-fi novel, I guess. The story revolves around a typewriter named Olivetti and its owner Beatrice, who as a writer has poured tons of secrets into Olivetti, up to the point where Beatrice gets a computer from her husband, and then Olivetti is put off to the side. One day, Olivetti is retrieved from storage and brought to a pawn shop and sold, and Beatrice disappears. Now, Ernest, Beatrice's youngest son, comes across Olivetti in this pawn shop while putting up missing posters for his mother, and Olivetti breaks the first rule of typewriters, is we don't type to humans. But together, Olivetti and Ernest begin to explore his mother's memories in hopes of finding her. It's such a quirky premise, and Olivetti is such an interesting character. He reminds me a lot of, if you've read Remarkably Bright Creatures, Marcellus the octopus, that same kind of humor and wit. I was not expecting it. I was not expecting to enjoy a book about a sentient typewriter as much as I did. A typewriter who really hates books, by the way. There's a deep, deep hatred there that you will know from like page 3 on. I'm excited to add it to my children's literature collection for the summer. I totally recommend that you check it out as well. Let's switch into my last book for this month. This is nonfiction. It's Empty Mansions, The Mysterious Life of Huguette Clark and the Spending of a Great American Fortune, which I found fascinating. I had read a New York Times article about Huguette back when it was found out that this heiress who was worth millions upon millions of dollars had spent the last 20 years of her life in a New York City hospital. And no one seemed to know. And this book was mentioned, and it had been on my list for a really long time afterwards. The book starts out with her father and the ways in which he built up his wealth, and then shifts into Huguette's work as she gets married, and that marriage gets annulled, and she gets deeper into her artwork and her doll collecting, and the ways in which she spent money in such interesting ways. She would do things like create these just exquisitely detailed doll houses, but also would like give money to really anyone who needed help and had asked her. It's such an interesting character study of someone who did not want the spotlight. And was she eccentric, or were there other things going on here? I'm not a psychologist. It's an interesting commentary on the ways in which money can insulate you from a lot of stuff in life. But if you are interested in the ways in which Huguette Clark and the Clark fortune got spent, I highly recommend both the paper version, because the book has some really amazing photographs in it, and then also the audiobook, if you can, at the same time, because there are phone conversations of Huguette with Paul Clark Newell Jr., who is her great nephew. And so you can hear her on the audiobook. You can see her in the paper book. Overall, really, really enjoyable. Lots of things to think about, particularly because she was such a private person. Shifting away from book recommendations, let's talk about my Tackle the TBR challenge to myself. Every month, I lay out 3 books that I want to spend time with in that month. And Empty Mansions was on that list. And this one is Red. So I'm excited to place this in the book bin and send it off. I also had Barbara Coleman's A Touch of Mistletoe on that list, and I finished this book last night, right before I went to bed, so I can check that one also off my list, and we'll talk about this in either a future short or maybe a future full-length video. It was an enjoyable book. Also, Daunt books, beautiful books. The feel of this book, the pages, the binding is just gorgeous. So that's done. 2 out of 3. My third is Familiaris, and this is David Wroblewski's prequel to the story of Edgar Sawtelle. I am currently reading this book. It's a vlog that will come out later, so look for that. But I'm making good progress. I feel like 2 out of 3 on December 27th. Not bad. If you're interested in my TBR for January, that short will come out on the 31st, so be on the lookout. That's going to wrap up content piece of this episode. As we're moving forward, I'll have a notes to myself coming out in the next couple of days where I'm going to detail some changes. But in case you don't want to watch that because it's not really bookish content, let me lay out some changes that you're going to see in January. In December, I've been releasing 2 shorts a day, and I'm going to scale back to 1 short a day and start releasing long form work on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So reduction in shorts, increase in long form. We'll see how that goes. I'll be participating in Tag Tuesdays. I've hopped on some tags. And the first tag that we'll explore on the 7th, I believe, is the Parks and Rec book tag, where I will be matching my favorite Parks and Rec characters with their literary equivalents. And then I'll have another long form video for you on Thursday. Going forward, that's the production schedule that I'm going to keep with until I can't anymore. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I truly hope life is good. I need to go pack, but I will see you in the next one. Bye.